Introduce yourself and then direct the question to the person you want to answer it.
Mainly to Yvette Cooper. Charles Grant from the Centre for European Reform. We've talked a lot about security guarantees, but when I was in Berlin recently, I met a lot of scepticism about the reassurance force and the security guarantees. I was told, is Putin going to be deterred by one British brigade and one French brigade? Probably not. The only people who can do the fighting is the Ukrainians. So make Ukraine strong by all means, but don't pretend these security guarantees are serious. And the Germans are not sending any soldiers to them. So can Yvette Cooper convince us that the security guarantees are really strong enough to do anything to deter Putin?
Thank you. So maybe for you, Yvette.
I think the security guarantees are a whole package. There's not just one little bit of the security guarantees. The security guarantees is a whole package that includes ceasefire monitoring, it includes the support for the Ukrainian armed forces, which I think all of us have said. It's the support for the Ukrainian armed forces that is the most crucial part of this, and also the willingness for other countries to provide a multilateral force Ukraine in order to be able to support Ukrainian forces, whether that be also through issues around training and equipment as well, and crucially the binding guarantees if there is a further Russian attack. So all of these things together, it's what European countries as part of the coalition of the willing have been talking to the US about. It's what SACEUR has been involved in discussions, military planning as well. Of course, it is a package of different dimensions, but I think the importance of it is also what it says about the broad-based commitment to continuing to support Ukraine. It will only work if it's also balanced with that continued economic pressure, the continued international economic pressure as well. But it shows, I think, the extent of the security commitment to keep supporting Ukraine.
Can I just add a few words to that? The idea of the coalition of the willing is not to put forces into Ukraine that are then going to defend against an attacking Russian army. So it's not about dimensions of forces necessarily that have to provide the credibility of security guarantees. The idea is that we have a ceasefire, that we have an arrangement about monitoring this ceasefire, monitoring any troop build-up. At the same time, we do all the efforts that Secretary Cooper just mentioned. So it's more than a numbers game involved in the whole comprehensive package of these security guarantees.
And you have to wonder, I remember, as I'm sure everyone here does, when Russia invaded Crimea. And there were calls in Congress for long-range weapons. There were calls in Ukraine and among some in Europe to give Ukraine the help it needed at that time. And for whatever reasons, the parties decided not to do that. And so now we're here again. And so I think in order to actually get a peace deal, there have to be security guarantees that everybody is comfortable with. Otherwise, we're going to be here again in 5 or 10 years, and Russia's going to be invading again. If not the rest of Ukraine, whatever the peace deal has, a NATO country, the Baltics, Poland, I don't know where, but that's the concern.
Thank you. We're going to run over a little bit because we started late. The lady there.
Yes. I'm Trudy Rubin, World Affairs columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Mr. Sybiha, Minister Sybiha, do you have confidence in security guarantees that don't have European boots on the ground? Why should Putin be afraid if he can attack first, as in Crimea, and everybody is worrying afterwards? And would there have to be enough troops so that it wouldn't just be like a small presence like at Srebrenica?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this question. Probably I mentioned earlier that boots on the ground is an essential part of future security guarantees, also because of business opportunities. If we have boots on the ground, it's also a deterrence and also a guarantee for future investors And it's also an element of encouraging them to invest in Ukraine. So we have also confirmation from some European capitals, and not only European capitals, regarding their readiness to deploy troops on the ground. Yes, probably they will be not close to the front line. Yes, it will be after the ceasefire. That's true. I don't know if we are talking about the mandate of peacekeepers or peace monitoring group. I don't know, because it is still in the process. But we need this presence in Ukraine. Also in future, Ukraine is ready to deploy its military forces in another geographies.
The gentleman there, and if we could take the lady here as well, just to accelerate the process.
Yes, thank you so much. Bob Dane from the Klingendahl Institute from the Netherlands. I've had the pleasure or problem to have to monitor Russian compliance with ceasefires before, both in Georgia and in Ukraine. And if there's a couple of things we know is that, one, Russia generally doesn't act in good faith. Second, it's very comfortable in the gray zone, very good at provocations and causing a lot of confusion. And third, once there is a ceasefire, the parties that negotiated it tend to want it to hold, even if there's evidence to the contrary. We also know that there's one of the longest front lines in history, over 1,000 kilometers. Complex terrain, urban terrain, forests.
Question, please.
The Americans will monitor it. How will you govern that ceasefire if there is violations? How will you get that data? And if it's only the Americans that have it, how will the Europeans act on it? Thank you.
Thank you. And the lady here?
Thank you so much. From the Ukrainian Europe Center. We hear some voices in the European Union, in Europe right now, to re-establish or relaunch a dialogue with Russia. So what is the reason for that? Is that the fear that the US has its own channel of communication with Russia and the Kremlin, and maybe it's finally the time to provide Ukraine with long-range capabilities, which is crucial for security guarantees for Ukraine?
Okay, so Ms. Cooper, do you want to answer the question about the monitoring, and then do you want to answer the question about the EU and interactions with Russia?
So look, Brigitte, obviously there has to be effective monitoring and compliance. You're right to say that we have experience in previous conflicts of violations, but it's exactly because of the violations that you have to have an effective ceasefire monitoring process that is drawn up as part of the security guarantees. And I think it's hugely important that the US is so committed to that process as part of the wider security guarantees. I suppose the thing that I would add to the reflections on this is we are also very well aware, I think, right across Europe, that the aggression from Russia is not going away, and that this is taking many different forms now. There are many different kinds of hybrid threats, of cyber threats, of the sort of the misinformation and election manipulation threats, sabotage threats, the different kinds of threats that we are seeing. So we know that that is not going away across Europe, whatever the next steps are in terms of the peace process for Ukraine, and that remains the case for Ukraine as well. And that is why I think for all of our countries, and is something that we discuss also as part of the NATO alliance as well, is taking ever more seriously the kinds of hybrid and cyber threats and so on we face, and recognising that alongside the defence and military capabilities that we need to continue to invest more in, what we also need to do is to strengthen our response to hybrid threats and challenges as well.
Can I add one thing to your list of hybrid threats? And that's disinformation, because we're seeing huge examples of that in the United States. I know we're seeing them in other places around the world, and we don't have an adequate response to how to address those, and it's very challenging.
And do you want to ask about that question about Russia? And sort of the European nations maybe thinking about reconnecting with Russia?
So in the end, Russia will remain in the current location where it is, and that's very close to Europe. So I'm not saying that we will not have any connections to Russia indefinitely. We have chosen, after the full-scale invasion, to cut our ties because there was no sense in talking to Russia at that point in time, and I believe there still is no sense in talking to Russia at this point in time. At this moment, I think the worst we can do is to provide President Putin with an alternative route to the route that we all want him to take, which is to come to the negotiating table under maximum pressure from the US. And I fully agree with the senator that we have to applaud President Trump in bringing about the talks that are now ongoing. Let's not offer Putin any off-ramps, any alternatives, any ways to weasel out of the pressure that he's certainly feeling. Let's increase the pressure, stay united as we have done over the past 4 years. And on that note, let me apologize for running off now for joining a meeting with President Zelensky.
No problem at all. Yeah, I was saying we've run over. But thank you ever so much. If you could give my panel a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you.